Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goët.
The pop culture lead now, a political cartoonist let go after 17 years with a newspaper chain, and right after this cartoon of his went viral. Political cartoonist Michael Dieter depicted President Trump golfing over the bodies of migrants Oscar Alberto Martinez and his 23-month-old daughter Angie Valeria, who drowned trying to cross the Rio Grande River. The president in the cartoon saying, quote, "Do you mind if I play through?" Dieter was a freelance artist for Brunswick News Incorporated. The newspaper chain denies canceling his contract over this cartoon, but critics are questioning if the newspaper chain's ties to a big-time oil giant with interests in the U.S. and a need to be on President Trump's good side may have also played a role in the firing. I want to bring in the cartoonist at the center of it all, Michael Dieter. Thanks so much for joining us. So, Michael, why do you think you lost your job?
I don't know, but the facts of my situation were that I spent 17 years at the paper, and even when cartoons were axed, which was rather frequently, I always replaced the cartoons. So I spent 17 years, filling spots and doing my job. There wasn't a day that I wasn't working that a cartoon of mine didn't appear. And I seem to have a good relationship on a Monday when I was talking to my editor, and then I had posted that cartoon online, and on Thursday I was dismissed, and without cause, like without a reason. I asked, what's the reason for this? And I went through a list of items. I mean, was it cost? And they said no. Was it gross incompetence? And they said no. Or was it my online presence? And again, no. And that was the end of the conversation.
Do you think business interests
it leaves you to wonder? It leaves you to wonder, right?
Do you think business interests in the U.S. played a role in your dismissal? The newspaper chain is owned by one branch of the family. Another branch of the family has this big oil business, needs to be on the good side of the American president, one would think. Could that have played a role?
That's the only thing that makes sense, really. Business interests affect all decisions at the newspaper and within the company. The bottom line is the only line, at the newspaper. So, 17 years, you know how the newspaper works. Nothing else seems to make sense. I mean, if I was given a reason, if they said cost cutting, I would have moved on, or I would have said I was let go because of cost cutting, and maybe the cartoon would have led to the same thing, but probably not. And I would have taken things at face value. I wouldn't be sitting here. I'm a reluctant, former employee. I didn't want to create. I didn't want this. I didn't look for this to happen.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't look to be fired, but I also didn't look to be, the poster boy for fired cartoonists.
So in a statement, Brunswick News said your contract was not canceled for the Trump cartoon. It said, quote, "This is a false narrative which has emerged carelessly and recklessly on social media. In fact, BNI was not even offered this cartoon by Mr. Dieter." It also said negotiations had been going on for weeks to bring back another reader favorite. What do you make of their excuse?
Number one, not to dismiss another cartoonist, but the reader favorite, who is a good cartoonist, is more of an Irving favorite. He's not an Irving is the family who owns the company. He's an Irving favorite, and two, possibly. I mean, I had the Sarah Huckabee Sanders, what I consider an even better cartoon of Sarah Huckabee Sanders a week before, and a cartoon on Trump shooting the media. I mean, all I know is that when the viral cartoon hit stands on a Wednesday, Thursday at, 1 or 2 or noon, I was let go without justification. And not only that, that morning I thought everything was good, so I had provided not one but 3 cartoons to fill out the week, and not only was I dismissed, but my cartoons were axed, and it was like hitting a brick wall. I mean, had they were just going with a reader favorite, they probably would have filled out the week at least.
It is Wednesday, the 3rd of July of 2019, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam, and our daily special is Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. Will no one rid me of this priest? Speaking of which, what the heck was Mike Pence doing? David brought this up. I still have not figured it out myself. What the heck was Mike Pence doing? Leaving a prepared appearance, hurrying back to D.C., curiously, at the same time, Putin was meeting with his defense minister. Makes you wonder. Is it all connected? One never knows. Tanks are rolling into D.C. Yeah, they're on flatbed trucks. Looks just like Victory Day in Russia. They have a Victory Day parade, and they like to show off their tanks, and they bring them in on flatbeds. It looked just like that. The lead up, the prep. So, I've had it said to me in the past that there's not one thing we should ever love, because everything is for sale. That was told to me by a Trump bro, happens to be my own. Way back, we were having a discussion on business. There's a difference between a house and a home, right? A home you love. A house is just something for sale. Don't love your house. Don't love a home. Everything is for sale. So when I have Trump bro, MAGA hat, big businessmen tell me they love America, they don't love America. They don't love anything. America is for sale. And anybody from that part of the political spectrum who says they love America, they hate America, and they hate Americans. They love other Trump bros. They love other people that are in business just like them, meaning their attitudes. They have no room for people who are in business that have any sense of, shall we say, egalitarianism. None whatsoever. Those people are weak, no matter how much capital they have amassed. Everything is for sale. They hate America. They hate Americans. And that's why it's so easy to sell it off. Tanks are rolling into D.C., folks. Victory Day Parade. I'll be standing with my hand over my heart on Independence Day, but I think I'll be taking a knee during Trump's salute to America. That is an idea of America that they just absolutely love. The white hooded kind. Where if you tell somebody to do something, they jump. And if they don't, well, it's off to the plantation for you. That's right. Or worse. What was Mike Pence doing in D.C.? Why was Putin meeting with his defense minister? Are these things connected? And why do about 60 million people think it's perfectly okay to sell off America? Well, of course, there's other news in the news. Border Patrol has an issue now, doesn't it? Yes, it does. And the whole private prison industrial complex that is absolutely a part of this. And what else? Sending asylum-seeking kids to Gitmo. Outside of constitutional guarantees, you know, that Netherland, where people don't really exist anymore, so you don't need to give them any constitutional guarantees. Little kids. That's right. Seeking asylum is now illegal in America. Absolutely violates international law, but who gives an F about international law? The only international law that counts is the law that we say it is. Our law. As long as our law doesn't include constitutional guarantees, even within our borders. It's a nice facade to say that you do have constitutional guarantees. But I'm beginning to think that possibly those constitutional guarantees under this regime are about as substantial as Trump's hair. Wispy, blows in the wind. Not really much there. Can we wrest our government back from this? Remember during the Obama years, all you heard on the National Mall was a bunch of white people with guns saying they wanted their country back. They wanted America. I was perfectly fine with the Rainbow Coalition flag idea of America. I was perfectly fine with that. It encompassed all of us. That was a frightening prospect to those who only live in America. Very frightening. And they love their guns. Had Kellyanne Conway out the other day, yesterday, complaining that we love the Constitution, not just the First Amendment. That she was essentially threatening reporters for asking her, why do you continue to violate the Hatch Act? And I came across a comment about Kellyanne being a traitorous box of wine. I figured it was perfectly an apt description. Very apt. Hey, what's on the rest of the menu here? In West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, while in the Bistro Cafe, that's where we are right now. Well, of course, that was Michael Adder, the cartoonist for the New Brunswick News. Oh, I'm sorry, Brunswick News, not New Brunswick, Brunswick News, who was fired after 17 years for his scathing cartoon of Trump. 17 years. Well, I guess he ran afoul of the publishers. Oil magnates who probably feel that, you know, we got to make nice with Herr Führer. You've got to go. And go he went. On the rest of the menu here, the lawsuit over Trump's tax evasion in Panama takes a strange turn. Facebook won't explain why it did not crack down on the Border Patrol hate group. They just won't explain it. And Congress demands the White House fork over Ivanka's work emails from her private account. Huh. That sounds familiar, doesn't it? Wonder where they are. After the break, we move to the chef's table, where the Pentagon says the China missile test in the South China Sea is disturbing. Disturbing indeed. And Japan is hit by torrential rains and orders 800,000 to evacuate the southern island of Kyushu. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. At the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, to the rightish of the page is the chat room link, monitored by Kelly Lincoln. Thank you, Kelly. Oh, I should mention, she will be at Netroots Nation, so look for the Netroots Radio banner and say hi. And she'll be roaming about, and we do have a table on Radio Row once again, as we, well, mostly do after all these many years. If you would please look to the leftish of the page at the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com. The link to our Patreon site is there, and that is so that you can help us continue resisting as the founders originally intended all those many years ago. And I'm not talking about the founders of Netroots Radio. I'm talking about way back. Okay, way back. We're talking about Jefferson, Franklin, Madison, Hamilton, and all the rest who said resist. And we need, well, a news media. They didn't call it media then, but we need a news media that will do that. And your generosity has allowed us to resist as we were, well, tasked at the very beginning. And though most of what keeps this concern afloat is what comes out of our own wallets, but we're truly unable to do it without you. If you could afford a coffee-type latte, espresso-type drink once a month, if you could send that amount of money that it costs to buy that latte our way, that recurring contribution really does help us. In fact, it's instrumental, okay? And we thank you for your generosity. And we've been resisting for 8 years, 24/7, 365, and it truly is because of your generosity. Thank you very much. Do follow the show on Twitter at Netroots Radio, and thank you, Tom, for taking care of that platform. I take care of at Justice Putnam, and I also post the show notes and links diary on Daily Kos about 10 minutes before showtime. Oh, I should mention also, as another postscript before we get to the post of this script, the Art Expo diary that I am a part of, and I thank you so much. There's some truly consummate artists. I'm in awe and I marvel at their work, and I feel entirely fortunate to be included. So do check that out. I got to tell you, there's drawings, paintings, pastels, photographs, poems. It looks really beautiful. So do check it out. It's almost like being in a museum, and many of the works are for sale. So more of those particulars will be made clear in the diary. 12 noon on the East Coast, 9 a.m. on the West Coast, and that's the Art Expo diary. So do please check it out. With that said, do follow the show on Twitter at CookbookWest. Pick up podcasts by way of Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, iTunes, and wherever podcasts can be found. With every single podcast in the world, we're down in the W's, West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. All right, let's take a look at this first offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. It comes out of Think Progress by Casey Michelle. From suspicions of money laundering to watching his name vanish from the building's facade, Donald Trump's former property in Panama has long served as one of the main headaches for Trump's ongoing business struggle since his ascension to the presidency. Now, an ongoing lawsuit threatens to open a new chapter in the saga of the former Trump Ocean Club property, and fresh questions about the building's finances. The building, over which Ivanka Trump helped oversee construction and development, transferred to new owners last year, with Trump's name being removed wholesale from the building. Led by majority owner Orestes Fentiklis. I'm sorry, didn't mean to butcher your name, but I did. The new owners recently filed a lawsuit in the Southern District of New York, alleging that they'd uncovered financial records showing that the Trump organization had spent years dodging Panamanian taxes. Well, Trump says that that's what makes you a good businessman, is not paying your taxes. All right. The filing claims that the Trump organization lied about salary expenses amid other financial shenanigans in order to limit its tax burden. Fentiklis added that the Trump organization misled his company prior to the purchase, claiming that the building stood at the fore of Panama's luxury hotel market, even though Fentiklis said it was in reality falling to the bottom of the market. The Trump organization has denied the allegations. I mean, come on. Trump denies that he sexually assaulted all those women. And this is after he's been on like Shock Jock radio and said, I do everything I want to do. Grab him right by the emoluments. What can they do? I mean, when you're famous, you can do anything. Just last week, the case took a strange turn. This time, hinging on what documents can or should remain confidential. In the letter first flagged by Courthouse News' Adam Klasfeld, the defendant's lawyers allege that the Trump organization's legal team had proposed that certain documents, or potentially all of them, remain confidential. Because now that Trump's supposedly the president, everything he has done and said is a secret. Okay, in this reporter's opinion, based on our conversations with counsel, we suspect that defendant's aim is to designate every document produced as confidential or highly confidential, which would preclude plaintiffs' representatives from being able to look at key documents. Well, according to the plaintiff's attorneys, the Trump organization is apparently worried about Mr. Fentiklis disclosing some part of secret marketing information to other hotels. But the letter states that there's no real reason for such a drastic step, and that the Trump organization's legal team has not explained why the proposed restriction is required, or even standard practice for the case. The Trump organization's legal team did not take long to respond. In a short 2-page letter, the defendant's lawyers wrote that the initial letter from the plaintiffs was an improperly filed letter brief. They acknowledged that the two sides had reached an impasse regarding potential confidentiality and suggested an informal conference to hash things out, which the judge scheduled for July 17th. Ooh, isn't that around Mueller Day? The debate over keeping all documents in the ongoing dispute about potential tax evasion confidential is just the latest in a line of bizarre developments surrounding the former Trump Ocean Club property. Not only has the building been credibly accused as the site of massive money laundering operations, last year a management scuffle broke out at the building with the new management kicking out the Trump organization wholesale. Physically kicking him out. I saw it. We even reported on it. Shortly thereafter, a Panamanian law firm representing the Trump organization issued a letter to then Panamanian President Juan Carlos Varela threatening potential repercussions to Panama if the government did not intervene on behalf of the Trump organization. All of these developments culminated last October in the public removal of Trump's name from the front of the building, the latest blow to both Trump's brand and his standing abroad. Luke Barnes, also of Think Progress, brings us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. Revelations that thousands of federal law enforcement officers were part of a Facebook group that mocked the very people they are sworn to help has turned the spotlight on glaring flaws in Facebook's hate speech policy. On Monday, ProPublica revealed that nearly 10,000, that's 10 with a K, former or current Border Patrol agents were part of a secret Facebook group that regularly shared derogatory, misogynistic, and racist content. In one instance, members responded with amusement or indifference to a story posted about a 16-year-old Guatemalan migrant who died in Border Patrol custody. In another interaction, a member of the group encouraged agents to hurl a burrito at these bitches, referring to Representatives Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and Veronica Escobar, who comes from Texas, by the way. And they, at the time, were visiting a border facility near El Paso. Customs and Border Protection officials said this week that they were investigating the incident, probably to give everybody a medal, because cruelty is the point now, isn't it? We take all the posts that were put out today very seriously. These do not represent the thoughts of the men and women of the U.S. Border Patrol, but it sure does represent their actions. I mean, just look at their actions. Brian Hastings, U.S. Border Patrol Chief of Operations, told CNN on Monday, each one of these allegations will be thoroughly investigated. I'm sure they will. The incident is hardly isolated. Last month, Reveal reported that hundreds of retired and active duty law enforcement officers were sharing racist, misogynistic, and Islamophobic content across dozens of Facebook groups. Some of the content was sympathetic towards patriot groups like the Oath Keepers and the Three Percenters, the latter of which avowed to protect a Republican state senator in Oregon who threatened to shoot state police. And I should add, I brought that up. I got pilloried. I had people, claiming to be actual Proud Boys. And it got rather heated, which made me realize, and I've mentioned this before, here in Southern Oregon, you can say anything you want about blacks, Hispanics, women, liberals, but once you say anything that is considered to be anti-fascist, you're Antifa. And you are un-American. I swear to God. The argument is that because we need to fight fascism, I am promoting violence against them. They're the ones that say it. All right. So just beware when you're traveling through Southern Oregon. I don't think the KKK needs to put on a hood. Now, numerous law enforcement agencies have begun investigations into their officers' posts on these Facebook posts. One of them, the Philadelphia Police Department, recently placed 72 officers on desk duty amid revelations that they took part in the groups. On Tuesday, Facebook said it was cooperating with investigators looking into the Border Patrol group. Yesterday, by the way. We want everyone using Facebook to feel safe. Our community standards apply across Facebook, including secret groups. A spokesperson told Think Progress, we're cooperating with federal authorities in their investigation. I'm sure you are. Pressed on how both that group and other law enforcement groups managed to sail under the radar, the social networking site spokesperson declined to comment, citing the ongoing federal investigation. We can't tell you how they slid through. Because I'll tell you, they stifle liberal speech, and hate speech is considered First Amendment. I know. And all they have to do is come into your thread, flood it with invective and threats, and that thread will be deleted. Okay? But try reporting their posts and see what happens. Nothing. You'll get dumped on, and it will be a torrential flood of these posts against you. And whatever you post will be deleted because you disagreed with their First Amendment rights to take away yours. That's how Facebook works now. Stankiewicz of Share Blue Media brings us this final offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Well, the Oversight Committee is upping requests after months of obstruction from the Trump administration. Trump attacked his 2016 opponent Hillary Clinton for her limited use of personal email when she was the nation's top diplomat. But Trump officials aren't known to practice what they preach. To any Republicans? Come on. This isn't our first rodeo, you know. In a letter to the White House, the House Oversight Committee demanded that the administration turn over all messages and communications that Trump senior officials, including Trump's daughter and her husband, Jared Kushner, sent through personal accounts in order to evaluate whether they broke federal law. Oh, a fishing expedition, say. Is that what it is? I think it's called oversight. The committee previously asked for certain documents, but following obstruction from the administration, the House is upping its requests. The purpose of this investigation is to determine why White House officials used non-official email accounts, texting services, and encrypted applications for official business. Because when you don't love anything, and everything is for sale, but you do know that you could be held to account, do you really want to have your selling out of America to a hostile foreign power on the public record? Not now. Later, but not now. Ivanka Trump has been one of the most prolific users of personal email for government business. Well, lock her up. From December 2016 throughout September 2017, Ivanka sent hundreds of emails under a private domain to government officials, potentially in violation of the Presidential Records Act. You know, that quaint little law which requires official business to be conducted on official government accounts so information can be stored and preserved. Well, when you're selling out America to a hostile foreign power, I think you really want to control the message on that one, at least now. But despite her father calling for his presidential opponent to be jailed over use of a private email server, Ivanka has claimed that the same standard does not apply to her because their genes are perfect. They come from the exalted. Everybody else is really, from, dust to dust, right? Mud. And obviously, look at her. And then you look at Hillary. All right? I guess, in a certain sense, you could say that Ivanka has that beauty component. It's kind of a weird beauty, but, it has this, something that appeals to a certain lizard part of her brain. And, of course, whatever she says is different than what everybody else says when they say the exact same thing. Look at her. Well, her emails might not just violate federal law, they could also violate the Trump administration's policy that all White House personnel conduct work-related communications from their official accounts. But of course, she's not an official White House employee. She didn't get appointed to any station. I guess they're advisors, but in an unofficial capacity, so maybe that's why she would be using it. Well, apparently not. Of course, Ivanka has not been the only White House official that has used private email to handle government business. Trump's former Deputy National Security Advisor, K.T. McFarland, you know, the one who's been talking to Mueller, used a personal AOL email account. AOL. You know, they really do want to go back to the 50s. Because I think AOL's been around since then. The committee's letter also said that the report issued by Robert Mueller found that Steve Bannon also used personal communications for government work. Well, under a Democratic House, it appears communication oversight is finally coming to the White House. They need not worry, though. Of course, not in just this reporter's opinion. Mitch McConnell doesn't care about what the House Oversight Committee has found. He already knows what they've done, and he knows how he's gonna take it to the Grim Reaper, where everything goes to die. All right, let's get to our break. When we come back from our break, we're going to go through weather from around the world and finish up with the stories that we have curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Take Two Movie Review. I'm Mike Friend. This week, did you hear the one about the female late-night TV host? Well, fact is, of course, this niche of the entertainment world remains about as white and male as it was before the first bra was burned in the 60s. The new romantic comedy Late Night is a peek into this world, focusing on the imaginary Catherine Newberry, a veteran host of a long-running Tonight Show-style program whose show has become increasingly out of touch and low-rated. Think The Last Days of Letterman. Catherine is detached, coldly British, and barely knows any of her all-male writers. Responding to network pressure, she decides to hire a young woman of Indian heritage, Molly, to liven things up in the writer's room. The movie is mostly the dynamic between the eager, young, working-class Molly and the Devil Wears Prada-ish Catherine, but along the way we get drama from the white male writers, who consider her a diversity hire, a sex scandal involving Catherine and a younger male writer, which spills into the plot lines involving her marriage, and the network's plan to replace her with a young, borderline misogynistic male host. Catherine is the indefatigable Emma Thompson, who, along with Mindy Kaling's Molly, elevate Late Night from what could have been a 2-hour sitcom. Mindy Kaling also penned the screenplay, which is sharp and pointed but never mean. A strong supporting cast includes John Lithgow as Catherine's husband and Reed Scott as the frat boy in charge in the writer's room. If there's a criticism here, it would be for missed opportunities. The scenes requiring Catherine's performance function for dramatic purposes, but could have been loaded up with far better jokes. As of now, the movie Late Night is about as close as we're going to get to the real thing, but maybe it'll spark something someday in a boardroom somewhere. This has been Take Two Movie Review. I'm Mike Friend. Catch up with us at take2moviereview.com and feed us back on our page on YouTube.
But Mom!
Don't but Mom me. You heard what the doctor said.
I'm fine. I just got my bell rung. It's not like I blacked out.
You've had headaches, dizzy spells, and you're just not yourself. That's not feeling fine.
Come on, I can't miss the game.
It's still serious, even if you didn't black out. It's better to miss one game than the whole season.
All concussions are serious. Know the warning signs and never let your child return to play before a healthcare professional says it's okay. A message from CDC.
Hi, I'm Tom Hartman, and since you're listening to netrootsradio.com, show your progressive side and go to the donate button on the bottom of the homepage. It's progressives like you who power Netroots Radio and keep the progressive message beaming everywhere 24 hours a day. Just go to our donate button at the bottom of netrootsradio.com. Thank you for keeping progressive radio at full power.
This Civil Liberties Minute is about prison labor and a high school. I'm Bill Newman. As part of a journalism class, an Amherst, Massachusetts high school senior, Spencer Cleash, wrote a 3,000-word expose on how his school system was using prison labor, inmates at Norfolk State Prison, to reupholster the high school and middle school's auditorium seats. The school system secured that contract for a reason. Massachusetts prison labor is cheap. Prisoners are paid between 14 cents and $1 an hour, according to the Department of Corrections. This extremely well-written story puts competing interests in sharp relief. On one hand, the prisoners are being totally exploited. On the other hand, the work can teach a skill. The story has gone viral. And as a result of the expose, the school system has announced that it will no longer use prison contract labor. There's an even bigger story to this story. And that is that good, accurate, thoughtful, well-written reporting still matters. This work by young people disproves Trump's insidious pronouncements that the press is the enemy of the people. It's not. And the students at the Amherst Regional High School journalism class, as Crosby, Stills, and Nash put it, have taught us well.
Your parents well.
The Civil Liberties Minute is made possible by the ACLU because freedom can't protect itself.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1860. That was the day Charlotte Perkins Gilman was born in Hartford, Connecticut. Her father abandoned the family when Charlotte was an infant, leaving them in poverty. This forced the family to move around frequently. Charlotte's education suffered as a consequence, as she attended 7 schools in 4 years. Charlotte often found escape from the chaos of her home life at the library. She drew on these experiences of financial instability at home to become a leading voice for women's economic independence. She was best known for her works of fiction. Charlotte's most famous work was a short story called The Yellow Wallpaper. It drew from her own experiences with postpartum depression. She wrote prolifically about women and work. In 1898, she published Women and Economics. The book made the case for women's economic and social rights. It was translated into 7 languages. Some called it the Bible of the early 20th century women's movement. Along with writing books, Charlotte founded the magazine The Forerunner in 1909. Until 1916, the magazine served as a platform for her thoughts on important women's issues of the day. As an accomplished writer, she delivered speeches across the country. While Charlotte was a leading voice for women's rights, she was much less progressive on racial justice. She gave speeches on nationalism and called for white racial purity. Much of her writings and speeches focused on the role of mothers and a call for increased economic independence for housewives. Her ideas on women were considered radical for her time. In 1935, Charlotte learned she had inoperable breast cancer, and she took her own life. After her death, many of her writings were forgotten. In the 1960s and 70s, as the women's rights movement gained momentum, her writings were rediscovered by another generation looking to advance women's rights.
Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
I read the news today, oh boy.
It's time for Nicole Sandler's What's News from NicoleSandler.com and the Progressive Voices Network.
The Department of Homeland Security's Office of Inspector General released a report on Tuesday confirming that overcrowded, squalid conditions are more widespread at migrant detention centers along the southern border than initially revealed. The report, complete with devastating photos, describes standing room-only cells, children without showers or hot meals, and more. The New York Times is running some of those pictures on its front page Wednesday. One senior manager at a facility called the situation a, quote, ticking time bomb. When migrants detained in the facility saw investigators walking through, they banged on the cell windows and pressed notes against the plexiglass to show the length of time they had spent in custody. One said, quote, help, 40-day here. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez was one of a group of lawmakers who visited detention centers in Texas on Tuesday.
What we saw today was unconscionable. No child should ever be separated from their parent. No child should ever be taken from their family. No woman should ever be locked up in a pen when they have done no harm to another human being. They should be given water. They should be given basic access to human rights. And it is a false notion. The idea that we have to choose between people is a false notion. No child ever has to suffer for the benefit of another. And I will never accept that argument.
The House Oversight Committee will hold hearings on the treatment of migrant children on July 12th. The committee invited the acting heads of the Departments of Homeland Security and Customs and Border Patrol to testify. Score one for democracy. There will not be a citizenship question on the 2020 census. The Supreme Court last week blocked the administration from adding the question, saying it did not provide a sufficient rationale for including it. Opponents of adding the question said it was designed as a Republican effort to depress response rates in largely Democratic immigrant communities. Well, the House Ways and Means Committee finally filed a lawsuit against the Treasury Department Tuesday in its latest push to obtain Donald Trump's tax returns. The panel, headed by Chairman Richie Neal of Massachusetts, filed a complaint against the department and the IRS in federal court, asking them to order the defendants to comply with Neal's subpoenas and a section of the federal tax code. This is the first time House Democrats have gone to court themselves to obtain such records after repeatedly requesting the IRS release the returns directly. Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin rejected Neal's request in May, saying that it lacked a legitimate legislative purpose. Neal then moved forward with subpoenas to Treasury and the IRS for the returns, which Mnuchin also refused to comply with. Neal said in a statement, due to that noncompliance, the committee is now pursuing this matter in the federal courts. In a massive display of ego and narcissism, Donald Trump is getting his big military parade through the streets of D.C. after all. Washington is prepping for the military-themed 4th of July celebration, a salute to America. But many worry it'll devolve into a partisan political event with good reason. Trump will break with tradition and deliver a speech in front of the Lincoln Memorial, inserting himself into the Independence Day festivities that have remained apolitical for decades. The White House has been distributing VIP tickets to Republican donors and political appointees. The Republican National Committee and Trump's re-election campaign confirmed Tuesday that they had received passes they're handing out for the event. No tickets were given to Democrats. The National Park Service says they've diverted $2.5 million in park fees for this ridiculous event. The $2.5 million represents just a fraction of the extra costs the government faces as a result of this event, which includes displays of military hardware, flyovers by an array of jets, including Air Force One, the deployment of tanks on the mall, and an extended fireworks show. By comparison, according to former Park Service Deputy Director Dennis Galvin, the entire 4th of July celebration on the mall typically costs about $2 million. And in case you were wondering, the diaper-wearing 18-foot-high baby Trump blimp will be there, though the restrictions placed on it are ridiculous. Code Pink went through the process of getting permits to have the blimp there. The permit states that, quote, all balloons are prohibited on the National Mall, but that the service would allow the Trump balloon to be present if it adhered to certain conditions, including being, quote, filled with cold air only and unable to achieve flight. In a statement, Code Pink co-founder Medea Benjamin said that, quote, it's not in the location we requested within line of sight of the Lincoln Memorial where the president will be speaking. According to the statement, the group had requested to fly the balloon, quote, on the large, empty expanse at the base of the Washington Monument that would not have obstructed anyone's view, but would have allowed the president to see the baby. It's ironic that as right here in the land of the free, the balloon is being grounded. And that's just a bit of what's news for now. I'm Nicole Sandler. If you appreciate these reports and the Nicole Sandler Show, I hope you'll consider making a contribution. My work is 100% listener supported, and I can't do it without your help. Find out more at NicoleSandler.com/donate.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. We always begin weather from around the world along the banks of the Rogue River in the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 61 degrees Fahrenheit, slated for a high of 82 to 85. Winds are currently out of the due south at a negligible 1 to 2 miles per hour, affectionately known as light and variable, picking up to 5 to 10 miles per hour, but have shifted out of the north-northwest in about an hour to an hour and a half, remaining out of that direction tonight and tomorrow at that same clip of 5 to 10 miles per hour. We are under partly cloudy conditions, should clear up a little bit later. Grass pollen remains high. The air quality index is in the good range at 13 parts per million, and that daytime UV index remains very high at 9. Barometric pressure is currently holding steady at 29.84 inches. Visibility is at 9 miles, and relative humidity is at 83%. Well, there is a bit of a forecast of rain, smattering of it, possibly from thunderstorm activity because of that confluence of heat and cold. So we could have some bit of precipitation falling. Very small chance, but the humidity is there, and we may be hearing some claps of electricity high in the sky. Weather from around the world is brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property, and these people positively live around the world. London is 72 and partly cloudy. Paris is 78 and sunny. Rome is 95 degrees and sunny. Kiev, 77 and fair. Kabul, 85 degrees, fair, but with some wind. I guess that's fair. Hong Kong is 79 degrees with a rain shower. Tokyo is 77 degrees Fahrenheit with a rain shower, and they are under a flood watch, and we will get to that story right away in the chef's table. Sydney, Australia is 60 degrees and partly cloudy. San Francisco, California is 55 degrees and partly cloudy. And New York, New York is 82 degrees Fahrenheit and mostly cloudy. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property, and these people positively live around the world. anonymous worker bees out of Reuters bring us this first amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. The Pentagon said a recent Chinese missile launch in the disputed South China Sea was, quote, disturbing, and contrary to Chinese pledges that it would not militarize the disputed waterway. Really? Has it never been militarized? The South China Sea is one of a growing number of flashpoints in the U.S.-China relationship, which include a trade war, U.S. sanctions, and Taiwan. Wow, Taiwan's almost like a verb. China and the United States have repeatedly traded barbs in the past over what Washington says is Beijing's militarization of the South China Sea by building military installations on artificial islands and reefs. Oh, you don't have any land there? We'll just make some. A U.S. official speaking on the condition of anonymity said, is that how you pronounce it? Said China tested multiple anti-ship ballistic missiles over the weekend. Of course, the Pentagon was aware of the Chinese missile launch from the man-made structures in the South China Sea near the Spratly Islands. Gee, this comes at a time when we've given up on our own military exercises with South Korea. You know, because Kim Jong-un wrote so many love letters. And now China gets to have their, I don't know, foray, their point of the spear. Well, the Chinese government has said that the military was carrying out drills between the Spratly and in the Paracel Islands starting last weekend and ending on Wednesday, warning other shipping not to enter a designated area. China claims the South China Sea, through which about $5 trillion in shipborne trade passes each year, are contested by Brunei, Malaysia, the Philippines, Taiwan, and Vietnam.
Je te donne ce mon amour pour la vie entière, la promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle, c'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer, mes automnes quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers, c'est tout.
Even more anonymous worker bees at Reuters bring us this final amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Japan ordered more than 1 million people in the southernmost island of Kyushu to take shelter in evacuation centers and other safe areas on Wednesday today, as heavy rains triggered small landslides and threatened to cause widespread flooding and slides. So some parts of southern Kyushu have received over 39.5 inches of rain since Friday, about as much as usually falls in the whole month of July. Evacuation orders were issued for 1.1 million residents at the southern tip of Kyushu. Now that's up from the 800,000 that I had when I first put this together this morning. Only some 3,500 people had evacuated as of 0700 Greenwich Mean Time. This is terrible news. If you happen to be there, get out. All right, this brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day, but we will be back here tomorrow for Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night for all the breaking news as it breaks, and we'll meet up here tomorrow, right here in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair, t'embrasser les yeux ouverts, dans mon jardin d'hiver. De novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.